Victims of narcissistic abuse are actually significantly more likely to underplay, downplay, or minimize the abuse that they're experiencing than to exaggerate it. And this is because people who are in relationships with narcissists and similar pathological personalities experience so much self-doubt, psychological and emotional manipulation, cognitive dissonance, and trauma bonding, which causes them to actually suppress the reality of what's going on in the relationship. There's a high level of betrayal blindness in these situations. And because the trauma bond is about attachment is about survival, and trauma bonding is a malfunction of attachment that paradoxically hyper bonds a victim to their abuser through that cycle of abuse and repair. Their system is generally actively working to keep them in the relationship. They're more likely to pretend to everyone that everything is okay, to self-isolate rather than tell the truth, and to try to make their abuser look good rather than bad. And oftentimes the victim is so confused and paralyzed by that extreme cognitive dissonance, which in a relationship with a narcissist is the inability to reconcile the amazing or love-bombing version that they met in the beginning and see intermittently throughout the relationship with the abusive monster that the abuser turns into also intermittently throughout the relationship. I also find that women in particular generally have no idea how much danger they're actually in, massively underestimating the level of pathology that they're dealing with, how deranged, crazy, and dangerous the abuser, narcissist, or similar personality actually is. And this is to the point that more often than not, I have clients come to me saying things like, oh, I'm pretty sure they're not a narcissist or a psychopath. I'm pretty sure they're not. I think I'm just imagining it. I don't think they're really that bad. They're probably just kind of a jerk. Or maybe even I'm the abuser. And then they go on to describe the most textbook pathological pattern of narcissistic abuse and narcissistic behavior or psychopathic similar personality and terrible psychological and emotional abuse. Often also telling me that there's actually no physical abuse in the relationship whatsoever, only to a few sentences later tell me about some kind of physical abuse, right? So people in these relationships are significantly more likely to massively underplay how bad the relationship is. Not only to others, but to themselves because of that extreme betrayal blindness of the reality of what's going on. And the reality is that the problem with people who are stuck in relationships with narcissists and psychopaths who are actively abusing them in a whole myriad of ways is that those people keep defaulting through the cognitive dissonance to the good version of that person. And going back to that, forgetting and suppressing the reality of the abuse and thinking, actually, maybe this person is amazing. Maybe they are a good person. Maybe they are the love of my life. And that is the issue, not the abuse. In fact, it's generally really difficult to keep victims of narcissistic abuse who are trauma bonded and driven to want to return to the relationship on track, remembering the abuse and the reality of how bad the relationship is. And so victims of this type of abuse are unlikely, unless they've already done a lot of work, to even realize how bad the relationship actually was. And the trauma bond is an addiction, so they're addicted and they go into withdrawals. That contributes to it. And high levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, over time actually affect the hippocampus, which is where short-term memory is stored. So if you've been in one of these relationships or you're in one of these relationships and you're wondering if it's actually that bad, chances are it's significantly worse than you're thinking or remembering. And if you know someone who's in one of these relationships or trying to support someone in getting out, the relationship is probably significantly worse than what they can remember or are telling you. And there's this high level of delayed realization that people who have been in these relationships experience, which is where it's often not until many weeks, months, or years after the relationship that their body feels safe enough to access the reality of how bad it really was. And it can take a very long time for people to come to terms with how badly they were abused, all of the ways they were lied to, manipulated, cheated on, the things they were cheated out of, and for the reality of the situation to actually start to occur to them.